Welcome to Ali Fitness Podcast, a weekly production all about bringing health into fitness. So from the Olympic stage of beach volleyball to the corporate and conference stages on 3 continents, Annette Lynch is a game changer. So her mission is to help athletes, business and community leaders be changers themselves, arming them with confidence, skills and solutions to lead and succeed. Her self-motivation, drive and curiosity found a way to not only realise a 25 years of playing for her home country, Australia, in the 2000 Olympics in Sydney, but also to forge a new career beyond sport. The game change was not easy. A fierce competitor on the court and even with a university degree in physiotherapy, she was not fully prepared for retirement. In fact, I believe she retired 3 times over 6 years, not unheard of with several elite athletes. And then she finally took charge to change her game and change her life. So Annette became a master's results coach, NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, practitioner and trainer, and went on to write her experience and studies in Success Beyond Sport, How to Retire from Sport and Keep Winning. Her 8-step program provides the foundation to create success in business and life. She also runs, I believe, an online course that helps people, not just previous athletes, but all people change their life, get back on track and succeed. So Annette, firstly, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ali. Great to be here.
Excellent. It's a great pleasure to have you on. And I've seen your transition and really have been dying to share it with the rest of the world. And I know if they get your book, they can do that. But can we just start off with, what was the transition like for you from going to an Olympian volleyball player to retirement?
It definitely was a long one. It highs and lows as much as my sport was. When I first retired was after the 2000 Olympics, and that was the Olympics was a culmination of a 25-year dream. My sporting career actually started in gymnastics and at a young age, and so really sport was my life. And I was 34 when I first retired, and really looking forward to life outside of sport, you know, being able to do things that I guess sacrificed to do sport for, and to be always training. And I thought, you know, I can be normal and, and do other things. And it just wasn't really what I had anticipated. Things didn't go as easy as I had wanted. And I think part of the problem was not really being clear in my career direction. And slowly but surely, I fell back into my sport. I was still playing on the domestic tour nationally, and it came about that someone needed a partner on the world tour. And so in 2002, I was back playing on the world tour and actually had one of the best years. So, you know, possibly had retired too early. At the end of that year, I was like, yeah, I'm ready to give away that side of my sport, and actually gave it away completely, both internationally and nationally. And the things I really want, my goals were, you know, to look at my career. I had a physiotherapy degree, but I wasn't passionate about that. I was interested in sports marketing and sports media, but I didn't really have the degrees and the qualifications, and I had a bunch of excuses for not pursuing that. I would dabble here and there. I'd do a little internship at, you know, a local TV station to try and get into that. I was working in with various associations, sporting associations, and I was looking for love and wasn't finding it, and I really fell into a hole and wasn't really happy with life, and so I went back to volleyball, and you know, and in some way, unfortunately, I was still quite good at it. I was still winning on the state tour, and I was back into finals on the national tour, and you know, at 40, I was still playing and still playing at a high level. And the thing that helped me to retire for the third and last time was really finding a new direction. And I was still playing on the national tour, and I started going to some personal development seminars. And, you know, I really opened up my eyes and realized that my life was ahead of me. I realized then at that point I'd really been walking as if like, well, you know, I've done what I've reached the peak of my life. It's behind me. And that's that. And really hadn't set new goals that inspired me. it was really get going by day. And at these seminars, I was like suddenly thinking about, well, what do I want to do with my future? And suddenly my eyes were looking ahead and not back, and it really changed everything. And I really wanted to, I actually had a promise to play in a final tournament on the national tour with someone, and I just couldn't play. I just can't. My heart's not in it. I'm doing these other things, and was looking to become a motivational speaker, a coach, and do all these things, and it was completely different, and it lifted me out of my malaise, my depression, and changed things from then on.
So backtracking then, your story actually sounds familiar in that you retired 3 times. Do you think, you mentioned that you perhaps retired too early, so when should athletes really think about the transition?
The thing is that it happens differently for different athletes, and you just never know when an injury is going to be, finish your career before you really even start your big career. And so it's knowing that it could be around the corner, and thinking about what your life would be like without sport, and what other aspects of your life you want to cultivate, and whether that's building your career and studying other things that can help you in your career outside of sport. And but also just, I think the biggest thing is really contemplating that your sporting career is a stepping stone to other things and not the end all be all. It's not the destination, and planning ahead and thinking, what can this be a stepping stone to?
So do you think in hindsight then you would have done it differently?
I definitely, knowing what I know now, I mean, the other aspect, other than not having clear goals and direction, was not really backing myself and believing in myself in regards to my goals. I thought I wanted to get into sports media and sports marketing, and, I still had a passion for that. And I actually, I ended up doing various little stints here and there. And my sort of beliefs that were holding me back was, I didn't have qualifications. I didn't come from a high profile sport. I wasn't high profile. That would make me a asset, I guess, or a real draw card for, especially in TV or sports media, to want me. And so I just didn't back myself and push myself in those areas. With sports marketing, I didn't do the study, and it's like, well, why didn't I, if I was really wanted to do it, why didn't I then, look at various courses to do that, and in some way invest in myself to make those dreams happen, the same as I invested myself in my sport to make my Olympic dreams happen. So definitely looking back, there's various things, and I guess the biggest thing is I've gotten really clear on what I wanted to do, and look at how could I make that happen earlier, than rather than waiting until that retirement to start thinking about it.
So what are the greatest challenges then for athletes post-sport?
The greatest challenges, and there are programs out there, and depending, I guess, where the athletes are based, but I've seen some provided by national organizations, whether specific to a sport or specific, to a country and their association, that are focused on the career transition, creating a new career, and when that's based on their strengths and retraining in a way. And I definitely had that in Australia with we had athlete career education, and had mentoring with regards to building a resume. But that's one thing of having career, but I found the biggest challenge was actually coping with with the retirement, and dealing with the identity factor. And it's like, who am I now? Because I've identified with being an athlete and being an elite athlete at that, and now I didn't have that anymore. So the identity factor is a big thing, and that leads to, I'm not an expert on depression. I'm not a psychologist, but I've read up a lot about it. But I think identity falls a lot into it, a lack of self and a lack of definition. And I definitely came into that not knowing who I was and who I wanted to be in a way. So definitely that's a big challenge. Other challenges that come for some athletes and from some sports that have had a lot of money in their sport is bankruptcy. They mismanagement of their money, and it definitely didn't occur with me because in my sport there wasn't a lot of money to then go and squander. So I was always quite efficient with my own money handling, especially in the US with a lot of the professional sports here. They deal with that. So those are probably the two biggest things that athletes deal with.
And is there quite a lot of knowledge and speak about, I don't know how you'd even label it, but would it be like post-pro athletic depression, or is there much talk amongst athletes or past athletes about that?
Not amongst athletes, and I think that is really a big part of the challenge is, athletes sort of go it alone, and I know I went it alone. I mean, I went through some really bad patches where I just felt paralyzed in a way in my life, and I was at home and just bawling and crying. I just wasn't happy with my life. I felt very alone and just wouldn't even think of speaking that with anybody. And I think athletes, it's this combination of like, hey, I can handle this, I can tough it out. And that's one point. And they also think that they're the only ones going through it. But, everyone goes through it at certain levels. And I think, it's definitely not a sign of weakness to share that and to share what you're going through. If anything, it's a sign of weakness when you don't dare to share that. And I think the more people can talk about what they're going through, it helps to ease through that. And there's definitely lots of cases of athletes that, go to, get to quite an extreme case and having to go to rehab and various cases. And, some in Australia, some of the highly reported cases with, Grant Hackett, with Ian Thorpe, Chantal Newbery from diving, they, went through some tough stages and admitted to that. And, and there was recently something on ABC in Australia about athletes and saying that there's no support out there. And, I think there is support out there, but I just don't think athletes know where to look or know even to take it upon themselves to look for it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and we'll get to that later. I'd like you to tell us about where people can go. But just in terms of your personal experience, how did you get through it? And obviously you mentioned that you went through a time of depression, that sort of thing. What was the big changer for you? And then how did that take you on your next path?
Yeah, well, it was really the personal development seminars. And it's really that personal development is looking at how can you take charge of your life. And that's the first step in my program is taking responsibility, is that how I feel and what I do is up to me, and if it's not, no one else can do that for me. I can definitely take responsibility to ask for help and go to help me along my dreams. But, most of all, we've got to take responsibility first and foremost and not expect handouts, or it's like, hey, the support's got to come to you. And I think that was an eye opener. And at these couple of seminars, it was about, setting new goals. And I just suddenly felt inspired again. It was like I was 10 again, because, my inspiration came when I was 9 and a gymnast, and, saw Nadia Comaneci at the Olympic Games. And I thought, yeah, I want to do that. And, that dream and that goal drove me to do things that I would never have done without that goal. And so I needed that again, and setting new goals of becoming a trainer, a motivational speaker, and doing these series of courses. I invested in myself by getting into these courses, and they made a massive difference to my life. And part of that was the NLP, the neuro-linguistic programming, which was a bit of rewiring of how my mind worked and reprioritizing what was most important to me. And, one of the things that was interesting is how much I had prided myself on my independence. That was one of my number one values, and that had gotten me, so far in qualifying and getting into the Olympics. But I sort of saw also that was holding me back in certain ways, because I wasn't looking for support. I wasn't building a team around me to make my goals happen. And those little things and those little tweaks in my mind and my thinking really helped turn it around.
Okay, so sorry to interrupt there, but how did NLP then help you turn that particular thing around in terms of building up a team around you and getting support?
It was a lot around my belief factors, and our beliefs and our values are set at a very early age, and we're sort of wired in a certain way. This is how life is, and you sort of wonder why does that person think like that, and I think like that, and it's because we were wired that way from an early age, basically on what we were exposed to, often in our family or in our community, and then we go through life thinking this is how it is, and suddenly it's like, no, it's whatever you want it to be, and you can choose a new way of being. And so I realized it was almost like a limiting belief that I had to be independent to succeed. And suddenly it's like, no, I need a team to succeed. It totally changed that around. And that's just a small example. I was looked at my self-worth, and, even though, I'd achieved amazing things and had gone to the Olympics, I haven't touched on this. I actually didn't think that was a big deal. I actually didn't celebrate enough that, this was something I dreamt of for so much of my life, to get to the Olympics. And I wasn't even celebrating it. It was like, I'm just an Olympian. That's really how I labeled and identified myself with. But suddenly I was hanging around with people that had never even met an Olympian, let alone go to the Olympics. And I realized, what I had achieved. And up to then I had been comparing myself to, gold medalists and other athletes that achieved so much more. And I just, didn't claim my achievement. And, those things changed. I suddenly really felt, worthy in different ways, and took pride in what it was who I was and what it was that I wanted to do.
Mm. Interesting. And you mentioned also that you sort of felt like you were 10 years old again, and you could almost it was like a wish list. You could almost just say, yep, this is what I'm postulating now, and this is what's going to happen. And I know you're not just saying that, because I actually remember, I can't even think about how many years ago it must have been now. Maybe it was like 10 years ago or something.
When we first met, would you believe?
Right. So, well, back then I remember actually having 2 free tickets to, I think it was a Chris Howard NLP seminar, and I invited you along. And part of one of the exercises was to postulate where we were going to be in, I can't remember, 5 or 10 years time or something. And I remember you telling me, I'm walking along the beach with these 2 Labrador dogs, and I can't remember the exact description, but it was something along those lines. And just tell us a bit more about that, because I'm still in absolute awe and and disbelief.
Well, yeah, it was, we basically were guided to create a vision for our life, and what it was most important to set a goal, and when was that going to happen, and to be really specific with that vision. And so I thought, well, very important to me was finding a man in my life, and I'd sacrificed a lot of that in my life to then, and so I pictured, okay, I'm on this beach with this man and 2 dogs. And I don't know why 2 dogs came into the picture, because I'm a cat gal. I'm a cat person. But I just imagined that this would happen. And, I pictured it being overseas. I actually sort of thought Malibu or the Californian beach. I had spent some time in the US, and just sort of had a feeling that was where, it might be. But, we set the goal and this vision, and then, really forgot about the specifics of it. It's not like, oh, I've got to look for somebody over there. I've got to be spending time on the beach and, get these dogs or anything. It was just, out of mind, and went around, focusing on my career goals. And then, I'd done some other goal setting things, at another course. I'd written down a bucket list, and one of them was live on an island, not knowing how that was going to happen. And then, at one of the courses that I did, I signed up for this whole series of courses with Chris Howard. And at one of them, we actually came to Hawaii. It was for a course called Billionaires Boot Camp, to get into the mindset of a billionaire. But it was at Big Island, Hawaii. And I thought, wow, this is great. It'd be great to have a home in Hawaii. And then a year later, I was internet dating, and was matched with this fellow who happened to live in Hawaii. And we corresponded via Skype and via email for two and a half months before I actually came and met him physically. But we'd already fallen in love. And I remember going to the beach with him, and we're on the beach with his 2 dogs, and they were labs, and not white labs, which I'd pictured, but pretty close to it. And I'm on the beach, and I was like, oh my, this is this is a lot like my vision. and I'm, got a house in Hawaii. So, it's about putting something out there and, not being totally attached to it, but getting clear on what it is you want.
Wow. I still remember the day that you told me about that, and I was, quite impressed. So moving back then to your transition, and you obviously sort of, I guess you did it the hard way in that you felt alone and you didn't have help to transition, and you found NLP, and then you've obviously now come full circle, and now you help people who are struggling in a similar way. You offer an online training, which we'll link to, as well as just one-on-one training, and of course your book that helps people beyond sport to succeed. But I guess I'm going to ask you two different questions here. Firstly, if you were to give advice for someone that was perhaps younger, wasn't thinking about retirement yet, what sort of advice would you give them in terms of maybe you should be thinking about retirement now, or what steps should they be taking even early on in their professional career?
Yeah. And, you always want to be positive and think, I don't want to think about, injury or anything. I want to be positive, and my career is going to be long, and which is great positive thinking to see that all happen and making that happen. However, I, would be thinking like, well, what's beyond that? And thinking about greater goals and thinking about your whole life and how does sport fit into the big picture so that you're not just one dimensional and thinking, well, if you could do something else, what would that be? And doing that with the same passion that you had for your sport. A little bit like a kid going to a candy store, like, oh, what can I have? What do I want to do with my life? And, hopefully you have, some idea of that based on your strengths and skills. But, can you add a little bit more clarity to that and set some exciting goals around there that would inspire you that, even without sport, you're trekking along. And, I think there's a lot of inspirational athletes out there that are, being entrepreneurs while they're still playing sport. I was just reading Inc. magazine, and one of the older ones a couple of months ago, and Venus Williams was on the cover, and there's a great article on what she's created while she's still playing sport and with her fashion company. And I think a lot of athletes, especially athletes from individual type sports, they do make great entrepreneurs because they have some level of independence and willing to sort of make some things happen. So looking to see, well, what kind of career you may want beyond sport.
Mm. And what about for those people that haven't really thought about that, and for all of a sudden they've retired, or retired through injury or through age or whatever it is? What's one thing that they can do now really to help them move forward?
Yep. And, so often, especially if we feel a little bit stuck and things aren't working out, we might sort of get caught up in this thing of trying to fix a problem, and focus on what we're not happy with or what's not working. And my suggestion is to get out of that and totally get out of, if you sort of draw a circle and think about your problem, your current life is in that circle, is think about what's out of that circle, what's in that not problem, so to speak, or look for that solution and think about what it is that you do want, and not to be fazed by what currently is happening and that you're trying to fix something. It's like just open, like a new book, new chapter. What is it that you want to create in your life? What do you want to do? You may want to look at what are your strengths, what you enjoy doing, and you may struggle to be specific at this moment, but, write down what it is that you do want. And as vague as it might be, it might be, hey, I want to be traveling, or, I'm working with people, or I'm working independently, I'm spending time on the computer, whatever that might be, writing it down, and it can start to take form. And, and I've used that many, many times when things weren't quite happening for me. And I still use that now and think, okay, what is it that I want to make happen? What are the important points? And it so often happens that those points, appear in that next opportunity.
Mm. Interesting. And so you mentioned that there is actually a lot of support out there now, especially compared to, say, 10 years back. What support is there, and how can athletes access that?
Yeah, there's various programs, and I've connected with various service providers over the years that have reached out and like, how do we, what sort of collaborations can we make happen? And it's often been a challenge because I just don't think the athletes are looking for it. I know in the US someone is working, and I can't think of his name right now, but he's working specifically with the collegiate athletes and helping them. They transition at a lot younger age because they've got their collegiate career and then hoping to go professional, but such a small percentage take that next step. And here they are, 21, 22, and their sporting career is over. And so they're working at the collegiate system. Various associations have them. And so it's really looking where you are located and really going for a search on the internet and seeing what's out there and, Googling life after sport is a popular one, athlete transition, athlete retirement, to see what sort of programs are out there. And then of course there's my program, the Success Beyond Sport program, and that's at successbeyondsport.com. And, people can start with just reading the book and getting an idea of the 8-step program. And I can tell you about the whole 8 steps, in a moment. And there's also, I take people through an online program, which is basically going through the 8 steps, but I'm, walking them through it. There's exercises. I use some of my NLP techniques with some visualizations. And so they're really, absorbing and getting into the program. And, you've been into some of the NLP courses and know the power of that. Because like the first step I mentioned before was take responsibility. The second step is setting your targets, which is all about goal setting. And I've talked about that a lot today. The third step is believing it, because one thing having a goal, but if you don't believe in it, don't believe it can happen for anyone or let alone for you, then it's not going to happen. So we look at beliefs and what are they and how do we change those beliefs? And then step 4 is the rules of the game is what I call it, but it's really looking at your values and your priorities. Because if something's not important to you, for example, people might want to lose weight, and you could probably relate to this, Ali, because of, your focus with health and fitness. But if someone doesn't have a priority particularly on health, as it's a low priority, then it always gets pushed aside. It becomes easy to come up with excuses. I don't have time because other things are more important. Their priorities are around perhaps their family or they're making money or, their career, etc. And so those priorities have a big impact on the results that you have in life. And so if you want to have results in an area, you've got to look at your priorities.
So when you say values, it's values, and then your priorities are really based on your values.
Yeah. It's, you can just ask the question, what's important to you in life? And, so you could say family, or you could say love. Actually, for me, to find the love of my life, and, my husband and I met online, what is it now, 9 years ago, thinking of that. And a big part of that was me, suddenly prioritizing putting love up to the top. And, I really hadn't put that, as a priority before that. And recognizing that, I was like, wow, I definitely valued relationships and was getting results with that, but the love factor was still missing. And when I realized that and put love up on the scale, that changed a lot of things for me.
Interesting. And so what's step 5?
It is play like a winner, which is really about getting a little bit into the zone that athletes can relate to, and really being in the right state to play, to perform. And that's to perform in life as well, to have that mindset, that focus that you need, to be focused on your career goal, for example. And this is something you can think about if you've got a meeting to go to, maybe you've got a job interview or something like that, to go into there in the right frame of mind, can make a difference. And then the last 3 steps are all about building your future. And so step 6 is about developing a dream team. And I've talked about that a little bit, about the importance of teamwork and who do you need on your team. You don't have to do it alone. And that even in individual sports, you rely on a team to some degree, no matter what you're doing. You need people to help you, and finding out which are the best people to help you. Step 7 is all about making it happen. Actually, it's one thing having the dream and everything, but if you sit around and waiting for the dream to happen, it doesn't happen. So you've got to take some action. And I go through some time management skills and planning skills, and how do you put that all together so you can actually take action that's constructive towards your goal. And often it's sort of a later step, because it becomes more clear once you've got your goals and once you've got everything else in place. Then suddenly it's like, oh, well, I just need to do this and this and this to make it happen. And then finally is the one that I touched upon with the biggest challenge, which is your identity. And it's going beyond being just an athlete, and knowing, really anyone listening to this podcast, is that knowing no matter who you think you are at any point in time, you are so much more than that. And to think about what you are so much more than what you currently are, and help people to step out and also decide who you need to be to get the goals you want.
I like that. And I guess you go through, being pigeonholed into a certain person, and I guess that's also linked to your self-worth. You mentioned that your self-worth was all tied up with your ability to play volleyball.
Absolutely. And and definitely, your identity goes up and down whether you win or lose, all those things. And you see it a lot with people. They're like, with retirement, just in general, retiring from a long career, suddenly you're not working, you're not employed. People can go through that sort of post sort of retirement depression as well, because it's like, oh, who am I if I'm not the breadwinner kind of thing. And so I think a lot of people can relate to that. Mothers, suddenly the first time mothers, losing that independence to some degree. There's a big identity shift, and some embrace it and some resist it. That can cause issues.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like those 8 steps are quite vital for anyone, not just a pro ex-athlete, but anyone that really wants to move on with their life and change a direction in their life.
Absolutely. And I wonder sort of, if I'd rewritten the book and just changed the title and just, change the focus, is like, for anyone really wanting to create change, anyone that's like, well, I'm not happy where I am, and let's change it. And I know I've constantly looking at how do I change my life. And it's about, some people hate to change, and this is really about taking charge of change. How do you want your life to be, rather than letting change happen to you?
Excellent. Look, I think all our listeners could benefit from that. So we're going to link to your book and your online training in the show notes, and really appreciate you coming on today and teaching us about this, and just being a living example of how you can be successful in one area and then totally change that area and bring all that energy and life force and do the same thing in another area. So absolutely so ecstatic that you could come on today. And before we let you go, we've got a bit of a personal question for you, something that we ask all our guests on the show. Most people hang up about now, but now that I've got you on here, do you have a tattoo?
I do.
Do you want to share with us a bit about it?
Sure. I have a rose on my shoulder, on my back of my left shoulder. And coincidentally, I got it pretty much in about a year. I think it was less than a year before my mother passed away. And in some way, I actually associate that rose with my mother. But it was sort of, it wasn't after the fact. It's sort of quite weird. But that was something I'd actually played around. I'd done some fake little rose tattoos for a long time before I actually thought, yep, I'm ready for that. And then I also have a tattoo on my finger. Do you know what that tattoo is, Al?
No.
Don't know. That's the Olympic rings.
Ah, I should have known that.
Yeah, so I went with a whole bunch of our teammates at the Olympics. We went to the official Olympic tattooist in Sydney, and I got to play in front of a home crowd in Sydney, which was amazing. And it's like, where are we going to put the Olympic rings on? And it's like, well, you wear rings on your finger. And so I just tattooed. I didn't tattoo, but someone tattooed the rings on my finger, on my right ring finger of all things.
Right. So the whole team got them.
No, they got different tattoos and stuff. So I was the only one that did it on the finger. Someone, they got them on their legs and one got this really cool squiggle on the inner arm, which was the squiggle that was this part of the Sydney logo, and yeah, and some people on their chest, and more the guys did that one.
Excellent. Oh, look, thank you
Yeah.
very much for sharing that, and hopefully we can get you back on the show again in the future to talk to us perhaps about some different techniques that we can use just in our daily life to set ourselves up for change for the better.
That'd be great. Thanks so much, Alan, and thanks for all that you are doing. It's great to see, what you're doing with your programs, and I appreciate being part of it.
Excellent. Thanks, Annette. For all the resources and show notes from today's episode, please go to www.ally.fitness. If you liked today's episode, please show your appreciation by going to iTunes, give us a 5-star review and subscribe.